Hey everybody, what's going on? Hellmite here, bringing you another video from Grab the Lantern today, bringing back the champ design breakdowns with today's video. I know it's been a while since the last one, but we are here today and we are going to be talking about Mordekaiser this time around. Now, Mordekaiser is very interesting and I think illustrates a very good point that I would like to actually make about these kinds of videos and how I kind of have to judge things if I'm going to be looking at champions from a purely mechanical standpoint. So, first, I do think Mordekaiser's current kit has a lot of really cool things and a lot of really fun little interactions that make it work very well and that I think help dictate what the player can and should be doing on Mordekaiser. Mordekaiser's passive, it requires 3 hits, which it makes for a very nice sort of two-part combo between Obliterate and Death's Grasp, right? You hit one, you hit the other, and then you're able to just weave in an auto attack and boom, you've got Darkness Rise going. Darkness Rise is also the most efficient way of stacking up Mordekaiser's W in order to get that big shield, and there's some tension with the W in between considering how you actually want to pop it for the ginormous shield or be able to use it for sustain, or maybe get greedy and just immediately go for the heal because you don't think you need the big shield value, right? There's a lot of sort of interesting gameplay that you can have in terms of that. Q's isolation damage is guaranteed if you're able to if you're able to ult a target, because if they're alone in the death realm, there's literally nothing that they can do in order to avoid it, right? There are no other units to potentially take them away from the isolation damage. So, off the top of this, right, it looks like Mordekaiser's kit is in a very good spot mechanically. And while it is, I think ultimately it ends up being more of a whiff than a hit for me. Part of this is because nothing that Mordekaiser's kit actually does is unique in any way, shape, or form. If you think about Q's isolation damage, right, well, Karthus has that, right? Or Kha'Zix if you really want to compare isolation damage, but Karthus already has that mechanic. Big shields on demand. Tahm Kench and later Set have that exact same mechanic where they can get big temporary shields to give them a burst of survivability. Death's Grasp functionally is just a hook. It is an AoE hook, so, you know, it has a little bit of gameplay in that regard, but generally speaking, the counterplay behind it and the feel behind it are very similar to things like Nautilus Dredgeline or Leona's Zenith Blade. Even Realm of Death, which I think is the most iconic and most interesting and like the most unique part of Mordekaiser's kit, if you really think about it, is just the next step in the evolution of 1v1me pro abilities, right? If you think about Jarvan IV Cataclysm, and then we got Camille's Hextech Ultimatum, and now we have Mordekaiser's Realm of Death, right? Which really just says no one gets to interfere with this duel at all. So in that regard, mechanically, Mordekaiser doesn't really do anything unique or interesting or truly his own, right? He just piggybacks off the back of a lot of other designs that Riot have previously had. And while I will admit that, you know, I'm sort of paraphrasing a little bit, I do think Realm of Death has some other implications behind its use case and different kinds of things that it does for him. And I obviously, Obliterate has some kind of different gameplay from Karthus' Lay Waste. Death's Grasp is a better hook in certain circumstances because it's area of effect. Generally speaking, Mordekaiser doesn't feel like he mechanically does anything new. He just retreads old ground that Riot have previously covered. And to make matters worse, Mordekaiser's playstyle is sort of generic Juggernaut. There's nothing about Mordekaiser that feels particularly interesting, unlike, let's say, Alawi, who has a fun, interesting, and engaging Juggernaut gameplay pattern with her tentacles and trying to manipulate them and sort of being a more defensive Juggernaut, if that even makes sense, versus Darius, who has the stacking minigame on his passive, where if he's able to get that, he has the ability to just start pentadunking the enemy team, right? That's a really cool mechanic that he has access to that helps differentiate him from other Juggernauts. Mordekaiser very much so feels like Riot said, we built him to be a Juggernaut, and that's sort of where he leaves off. But now I wanted to open with that because I want to say that I don't think Mordekaiser has a bad kit by any stretch of the imagination. I, in fact, quite like it, and I want Riot to change nothing about Mordekaiser's kit. I think it's perfect the way it is. So, okay, now you're asking me, Hellmite, how does this make any sense? You say Mordekaiser's kit is bad, but you also don't want it changed. And the reason for this is because these videos are intended to be looking specifically at a champion's kit from a mechanical perspective. Just raw numbers and effects and values and what it does. This does not have anything to do with champion balance, so specifically how good or bad an ability is in the context of the current metagame, or in terms of thematics. Right? I don't really care how flavorful a champion's kit is when I do these videos. What I try to do is look at exactly what they're doing mechanically. And this is sort of, then leads to some interesting context here, because Mordekaiser's kit is very well done from a flavor perspective. And this is because after his really terrible rework at the hands of Certainly T, forum posters took to the forums to specifically start talking about what they wanted Mordekaiser's kit to look like when he did get a full VGU, foremost among the Malicious Metal, who I know I've talked about on this channel before, but posting all sorts of comments and threads about what they want Mordekaiser to look like, what they want him to sound like, what they want him to feel like, what they want his backstory to be, what they want him to be like, you know, outside of the backstory, right? All of this stuff. And they did talk a little bit about gameplay, but generally it was always from a thematic lens, right? Mordekaiser should feel like a big Sauron-esque dude, right? The evil overlord, the kind of guy who just walks at you. He kills you with his mere presence. He's able to banish you to the Shadow Realm for a 1v1 duel if you really make him mad. He just sort of, all your damage just sort of like pings off his armor, right? Because you can't really hurt him at all. He truly is indestructible, right? That was kind of how the gameplay was talked about in these threads, from a thematic perspective, not from a mechanical perspective. And in terms of matching the thematics to the gameplay, Riot have hit it out of the park, right? Mordekaiser feels exactly like that, right? He sort of just walks at you, hitting you with his mace and killing you with a cloud of flying razor blades. Obliterate is for when you really make him angry. He has his necromantic abilities to draw you in closer, so even though he's slow, it doesn't matter because he can, you know, conjure this deathly hand to pull you towards him, or just banish you off to meet an Arachnon to fight him one-on-one, right? It totally works from a thematic perspective, and that's why I wouldn't want anything to be changed about Mordekaiser's kit. But if you do look at it from a strictly speaking mechanical perspective, there is nothing unique that Mordekaiser does for the game. Everything he does retreads new ground, and while that means that he's a very disappointing character from a mechanical perspective, it doesn't mean that he isn't a good one from a flavor perspective. And certainly this kit is a tremendous step up from his previous kit's incarnations, which just had random effects and abilities that had no synergy with each other whatsoever, and unclear mechanics, and you know, a lot of things that just sort of didn't make sense. And even in that regard, Riot did a good job of maintaining some of the iconic things from his previous kit incarnations into his new design. Things like having a big shield based on his old Iron Man passive, being able to do isolation damage on his Q is literally something he had in his initial iteration, where his Q did AoE damage unless there was only one target, then it did all of the damage to that target, sort of like how Master Yi Q works nowadays if there's only one target. Stealing target stats, that's another thing that Mordekaiser has maintained from his previous incarnation, right? So, like, even mechanically, you do have those sort of small callbacks, and then they make a lot of sense on the current kit. But generally, Mordekaiser's kit was designed as sort of a love letter to the fans, not necessarily Riot trying to do anything mechanically unique with the character. So, those are my impressions of Mordekaiser's design. So, go ahead and let me know what you think of Mordekaiser, or what I've discussed about thematics versus mechanics down in the comment section below. I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts. If you enjoyed the video today, go ahead and leave it a like, and if you really enjoyed the video, consider subscribing. I upload a video every Monday, Friday, and on patch days as well. Once again, thank you guys so very much for watching. I do appreciate it, and I'll talk to you all later.